Hey guys, how are you? Welcome back to another dungeon review of a level 14 Motherlode dungeon, which I've played recently on my Preservation Evoker. Now we are not a pre-made group, we are just a bunch of people from the dungeon tool. I think the DK was pre-made together with the Paladin and the Druid, but other than that, yeah, there's no communication going on. We also play a rather unusual route, I would say. So most people at this time are skipping the first pack in the dungeon by moving on the left side and then doing a big Bloodlust pull further back. But yeah, we just go the straight route, like the route that was intended by Blizzard, or at least that comes most naturally if you just follow the basic outline of the dungeon. And I would say, yeah, this might not be optimal, but at the same time it's not as bad as people sometimes make it out to be. You can time a key on this key level just fine. Even so, yeah, you do a route that's not quite the perfect one. We'll be talking a bit about the healing requirements of this key, and yeah, there are a lot of mistakes going on actually by the group, but also by myself, which we'll address to sort of develop more optimal strategies of dealing with certain encounters. I would say the first two pulls which we just did in this dungeon are relatively easy. It's important that the packs are controlled properly so that none of the iced spritzer casts go through, and that the hired assassins get interrupted immediately when they are casting the Fan of Knives, because it's a large pulsing AoE damage. Now here's the first major problem in the dungeon, which are those Peacekeepers. They cast Charged Shield, and there's a big pulsing AoE damage and a large tank hit. And you can see we drop very low here, because a lot of people take a hit from the tear gas on the ground, including the tank. I think the Paladin died to it. And also myself, I just clipped the edge of this puddle. And yeah, we are sort of a bit in a crisis mode here. And I also, to be honest, did not play this very well for the majority of the fight. I did not have reversion on my party members, and ideally you would always want to have reversion on all of your party members, because it gives them a 10% healing buff. But yeah, I failed to set that up properly, and then once you're in the situation where the Peacekeeper casts the Charged Shield and you are not set up for it, in the sense that your teammates already have their HOTS rolling and they have the reversion buff, then it becomes more difficult. What you ideally want to do with the Peacekeeper is Charged Shield is coming in and you have echoes on your teammates, and then you can life bind. I think I'm doing that right now. Yeah, you can see life bind. It's not perfectly set up. I could have hit the Demon Hunter as well. And then you can really heal up the group rather easily with a big empowered Spirit Bloom. It's also rather unusual to play the second Peacekeeper. Usually groups also skip that one, because there's really a lot of damage going on. You can see immediately a very large tank hit, which you have to somehow manage as a healer. And sometimes it can be challenging to balance dealing with the tank hit against dealing with the group damage, which is also going out at the same time. Generally, as a Preservation Evoker, I do not like so much to play with Blood Decay, because you can see their health is moving quite a lot and quite erratically, and especially if you're not in comms, I can't rely on the Blood Decay saying something like, yeah, you don't need to heal me, I'm fine. If the Blood Decay is at like 30%, I feel obligated to put some healing on them. And if you are playing a Preservation Evoker, you need a lot of setup time for your big heals. So you want to echo your teammates when you know a big AoE hit is coming in. Then you want to Verdant Embrace to apply the Life Bind, and then you want to cast a big Spirit Bloom to heal this AoE. But if during this setup, because you use 3 globals to just put up the echoes, if your tank suddenly is at 20%, then you can't really do anything about it. You cannot just heal him with, for example, Reversion to get the Golden Hour effect, because then you would consume all of the echoes you had previously applied to your other teammates and just buff them Reversion instead of Life Bind, which is the intention. So yeah, that can be rather challenging, and generally I like to play more with tanks where their HP movement is more predictable. Obviously also realizing that a DK can be good in the sense that they often don't need any healing, even if they are low, but yeah, maybe for a pre-made group this would be less of a problem. Now we pull the coin-operated Crowd Pummeler. It's basically not doing anything. You can just heal this periodically appearing AoE damage with the usual combo of Life Bind, Spirit Bloom, and then for the remainder of the fight you can essentially focus on dealing damage. A bit of an awkward situation here with with the bombs, because they are lying on this pipe at the side of the room. They did not have proper targeting, I felt like, or maybe I just made a mistake, not sure about it. Yeah, and then you just have the damage phase where you can try to deal as much damage as possible. I'm still somewhat over healing this boss fight, because just yeah, a habit to keep HOTS rolling on my teammates. I could probably do even more damage and focus less on the healing and just apply Reversion before the debuff, the static pulse is going out, and then heal group up once and then only do damage for the remainder of the fight. Because this boss fight is so easy, there is you have all the right to use all of your healing CDs on the packs that come before it. And it's also a rather difficult pack which we just pulled beforehand, especially if you pull the Peacekeeper together with the pack that is standing below the entrance. Then it can become quite challenging, so don't feel that you need to hold on to your Communion or your Rewind or your Stasis, because you need none of them for this boss fight. You can see here I'm delaying the bomb a little bit to extend the phase in which the boss isn't doing anything. The Demon Hunter got a bit worried there, I think, that I would not kick the bomb in and came to help out, but yeah, still fine. And then also at the third boss, Rixa Fluxflame, which is the little boss which is casting the Propellant Blast to clear off the void zones on the ground. The pack before it is also rather difficult, and there you can also use all of your cooldowns, which we will also see me do before we get to the third boss. This part of the dungeon is also rather dangerous, especially if the interrupts don't go out properly, because you will have to deal with the Azerite extraction pulsing AoE damage while moving around, while also having to heal spot damage sometimes. But if the interrupts are going off correctly, then it's not that difficult. Demon Hunter died there, standing in one of the AoE areas on the ground. One thing about Evoker here is that you can also dispel the bleed debuff on the tank. I haven't done that, unfortunately. Pretty sure I will do it at some point. You can use your Cauterizing Flame to dispel the puncture, which the Azerite extractors also put on the tank. You can see it right here. Let's see if I take it. Yeah, I dispel it. And you can do that just once every minute to help the tank out a little bit with the healing requirement. And basically this next pack is the same again. It's a little bit more difficult than the first pack, not because of the enemies that are included in it, but simply because of the space with which you are working, because you will have to be moving around once the Azerite extraction cast starts. And yeah, you need to be careful to not add any additional mobs. You can also see that I just fell down this ledge while moving out of the circle, which delayed my Spirit Bloom cast by about half of a second or something, and then someone was also out of range, so it can be a little bit difficult. And you can see all the casts are going off on myself. I sort of panic rewind this, because I see, okay, 2 casts are still targeting me, and I'm at like 20%. So I try to immediately top myself off, and if there's been a group damage going out before, then rewind is sort of the best button you can press for that. Not sure if you have an empowered Chrono Flame for yourself, an instant cast Chrono Flame, then that can also be, that can actually be better. I'm not sure if I had that or not. Then you can just target yourself and use the Chrono Flame, which will usually move your HP up to full or almost full immediately. Yeah, so far, except for the odd death of the Demon Hunter, we're doing rather well. I'm not super happy with my gameplay, so the setups aren't perfect, especially in the first half of the dungeon. But yeah, it's good enough, I suppose. But yeah, we will face some challenges in the latter part of the dungeon, which will really threaten this key being timed. Now in this pack you just need to make sure that you have the interrupts ready for the Tectonic Barrier, but especially for the Furious Quake, because the barrier is essentially just a shield, but the Quake does a lot of damage. And then this pack is also one of the more challenging ones, essentially because the tank gets beat up quite badly via the bleed debuff applied by the Taskmaster. Luckily, as an Evoker, again, you can dispel this debuff once during the fight, and I sort of just make a judgment call of when the best time to dispel the debuff is. Also, I think also a mistake that later in the dungeon, as you can see I just dispelled, a mistake that occurs later in the dungeon. What I did this pull is apply time dilation to my tank in the beginning, just to sort of reduce the overall damage that he takes. But I think that's a rather big mistake, especially for a DK, because a DK is relying on predictable movements of his HP in order to drop low and heal himself back up. Now if I time dilate and stagger the damage out, so damage you don't take now you will take later, this puts the DK in a very difficult position where the HP movements in the later phase are much more pronounced than they usually are. So the healing requirement on the DK for himself is much higher in the ticking phase of the stagger time dilate effect. So yeah, I would say use time dilate as an Evoker on a DK with extreme caution. For example, if you feel like if you don't use it now he will die, then of course it makes sense to still use it. But or if the enemy pack is almost dead, then also you can say, okay, I'm comfortable with dealing with the ticking effect later. But if that's not the case, then I would refrain from using time dilate, and we will also see why a little bit later in the key, because it actually produces some rather large problems here. Now let's talk a bit about this fight. It essentially has 2 damage profile phases. The first one is coming up. He summons an Earth Rager ad and then empowers an Earth Rager ad. And you can see it, there's an infused Earth Rager now, and as long as this ad is living, there will be pulsing AoE damage going out on the group. And as soon as the ad dies, this damage will stop. So the healing requirement sort of depends on how well your group is dealing with this, with killing the ad. My group was doing just fine right now, and then the second damage phase is the Resonant Quake, which we have here. He makes a big pulsing AoE damage on the group, and you need to make sure that the group is topped up before it. If you can, as an Evoker, try to stay with the range DPS, which is being targeted, so that you can hit them with your Dream Breath, you can hit them with your Temporal Anomaly. You can see I'm standing on top of our Druid, and you can also help out with your Wing Buffet and knock back the Earth Rager ad, which is targeting him. Overall, the healing requirement in this fight is relatively high. It's certainly higher than on any other boss fight in the Motherlode. But it's the pulsing AoE damage. It's not like a Swamp Phase from Floodgate. So if you are comfortable healing Floodgate, for example, then this boss won't be very difficult unless you have some range problems because of the larger arena. You can see here, now I put Time Dilate on the DK, because I see a big pull, a little bit of an uncontrolled pull, and what happens now when the Time Dilate ends is first of all he immediately procs, and he takes so much damage that he can't heal himself. I don't really expect the damage either, so I'm not perfectly prepared for it, but my toolkit as a Preservation Evoker of dealing with it is also relatively limited. I could have used Rewind, which would have healed an absolute boatload on him, for sure, because he took so much damage over the last seconds. Yeah, but I didn't. Rewind sort of mentally wired. Rewind is mentally wired to be a big group AoE heal sometimes, so you can also use it for this large tank spot healing, but I failed to do that. I think the DK was internally debating, does it make sense to continue the key, and I also was doing that. But I thought like 14 minutes, slightly above 14 minutes, is still barely possible if we pull somewhat larger and we don't make big additional mistakes. Yeah, but anyway, so on the last pull, when you have a DK tank, be very careful of using Time Dilate like I did, because ultimately, so the DK in the end says he played poorly and so on, but ultimately I think I was the one causing this wipe, or at least I contributed to it majorly. I think we also slightly overpulled, and that I was being targeted by the test subject rats in the beginning and had to ping danger also didn't really help. So there was quite a few things going on, but I think if I hadn't used Time Dilation, or had used it substantially later in the pull, or I had used Rewind to after the Time Dilate effect had ended, then we probably would have been fine. Like this, we are in a situation where it's very close in terms of timing the key, and we have to take some risks going forward. Ideally, you'd want to spread out a bit for the Echo Blades, because I think they jump between different players on these mobs, and yeah, you can see we chain this pull together, and this is one of the more challenging pulls in the dungeon, because you have the Mind Lash damage going on. You can see it on my by this flamey icon on my nameplate, on my unit frames. It's a big damaging spot healing effect, where you just essentially have to heal the targets in a single target heal. And then you have the Echo Blades, which damage multiple players. And then you also have this debuff. I don't dispel it here because I don't find it so threatening, but probably it's still worth dispelling once with the global on a weaker target, so not on the DK, with Cauterizing Flame, because it does do some damage, just not super much. Yeah, and I already committed my Communion. I don't need Rewind here, because there was never any big danger moment. But I would have been very happy to commit Rewind here, because this was the other pack in the dungeon where you can just use all of your cooldowns that you have remaining, because this boss again doesn't do anything. It's actually interesting that this dungeon has two bosses which yeah, it's, as a healer, you don't have to do anything here. So, except for the odd tank heal. But then again, even that with a DK, so some tanks you need to heal here a bit, because they will take some damage and not have sufficient self-healing to heal themselves back up. But on a DK, I do some reversion, I cast the odd Dream Breath every once in a while, and echo the tank, and leave the echo on him in order to be able to trigger it as soon as I feel that that might be necessary. And other than that, it's just doing damage to the boss for the entire time. And actually I also prioritize the damage even a little bit more, letting the tank drop a little bit lower from time to time, because I want to do as much damage as possible in order to still be able to time the key, which I'm beginning to get a feeling is going to be very, very tight. Although I have to admit I'm not so familiar with Blood Decay, so maybe if you know, let me know in the comments. If I do let the tank drop lower in order to be able to do more damage myself, does that cause a problem for the DK in the sense that he will not be able to do as much damage as he usually could? Because, for example, he has to use resources to heal himself, which he would otherwise be able to use for damage. In that case, because the DK is doing more damage than me, perhaps it would be better to focus more on the healing aspects to allow the DK to not have to do as much self-healing. Yeah, I don't know it. I haven't played Blood Decay except for like in Wrath of the Lich King, I think, but that's so long ago that there's probably not much resemblance between the classes anymore. So yeah, if you know, let me know. We are nearing the end of this fight. You can see even the Propellant Blast, which is on the Paladin right now, essentially doesn't do any damage, so even in that phase you don't have to focus on healing a lot. If you have any HOTS rolling, then that's absolutely enough to deal with this damage, even on a 14. Okay, so we get out of this fight with 9 minutes left. I get the feeling, especially with this minefield and the stuff that might go wrong on this minefield, and usually does when you're playing in a PUG, that's not a lot of time. So the DK said he will gather the mines, he did say that beforehand. And yeah, we are going to get into quite an action-packed pull, because again we make some mistakes here. So this pull, you can see two of my teammates get deleted immediately. Actually, let's see how that happened. Not really sure. Sorry for going back a little bit more than perhaps I would have needed to. So the Paladin and the Demon Hunter get deleted. They are... where are they? Can I see them? Yeah, they are on the boss. Yeah, it must have been... so there was no artillery barrage there, it must have been the bombs. And so yeah, suddenly we deal with this pull only with 3 people, which is a problem. Now we add the additional shredder. Not sure if it was me with my butt, or if it was the DK intentionally adding it because we would need it. Anyway, now this is with 2 ordnance specialists, a lot of mines, and 2 big machines. It's a big pull with a lot of AoE damage going on. So whenever the charged shot is going out, I try to apply Lifeline to the group and cast Spirit Bloom, but also that's a bit uncoordinated here. Now I use Rewind. Unfortunately, the Paladin gets hit by another bomb. And yeah, I probably should have used Zephyr at some point, but I always thought, not sure if I actually thought about it, but you can see here now I use it, and before I used the Spirit Bloom with the Lifeline. I always thought maybe I don't need it right now, and I don't think I did actually need it. So none of the deaths that we had were because of lack of the AoE healing, but instead we had some bomb connections. Overall, I think from a healing perspective, I think I did rather well on this pull, because there's a lot of moving around. It's a lot of sort of, yeah, it's damage you can plan for. But in a situation like this, where there's an unplanned pull with a lot of stuff going on, it's not so easy to mentally plan for it. So yeah, I felt like the healing was more of a PvP-esque scenario, where there's just a lot of damage coming in from different sources, and you sort of have to deal with it in whichever way you can. I get stuck here a little bit. And now, yeah, I make the mistake of not remembering that the ordnance specialist is here at the side. And I run through him, so I add an additional mob to this pack, which makes the pack a little bit more difficult. And but essentially it's the same pack we just played a moment ago. Probably a little bit easier, because we only have one ordnance specialist. I move out of the corner because I'm not happy with the position there. On the stairs I can always go back if a mine does manage to make its way up to me. Yeah, I might also have used Bloodlust here. I always like using Bloodlust on the boss in the beginning just to have the maximum value, in the sense that everybody has nothing else to do other than doing damage, and we have only this one lust. But yeah, in retrospect there is some risk going on with this pack for sure that I could have mitigated by just committing the Bloodlust. But still, overall, even on a plus 14 as a Preservation Evoker, you're relatively well kitted out to deal with the pulsing AoE damage that's going on. You can always Lifeline Spirit Bloom, then you can empower your Fire Breath to shoot out multiple living flames at your teammates, and that's usually enough to deal with it. And also keep your Dream Breath rolling, ideally empowered with a Breath of Viscera. Now this boss is relatively straightforward, so long as you have an eye on the choppers at the side. You can see one is flying toward us right now, so it's not safe where we were. I ping over here, and the other players also realize that this is the safe zone. I prefer this strategy over using the so-called safe spot in the bottom left corner, especially when you're playing in a PUG. Maybe I'm also not familiar enough with it to, but there's some overlaps with the Gatling gun and the micro missiles there, which can be somewhat tricky to deal with, especially if you're not in comms. And yeah, it's usually not very difficult to just move to the correct location. I would also say that from a healing perspective, as a DPS player, if you ever are faced with a situation where you either let the homing missile hit multiple members of the group, or potentially die to the micro missiles, just let the homing missile hit additional group members. It's not that much damage, unless of course they are low to begin with. It's not that much damage, one can deal with it rather well. Now this phase is more tricky because of the stomp going out at the same time as the buster shots. So as a healer, you want to commit all of your cooldowns to heal up this AoE damage as quickly as possible, so that you don't run the risk of someone getting one shot because they are targeted by a buster shot, and also by the big AoE hit. This is why I just used my stasis there, even though we almost had full HP, just to be able to make sure everybody has 100% HP and we are fine. Because in this phase essentially you don't have much to heal, except for the odd damage on the druid, on the homing missile target. And you can see the paladin also got hit by the homing missile there. Yeah, and again we can see the chopper moving toward us. I ping over here. Now the tank probably should have moved it a little bit earlier. Druid gets killed by the Gatling gun. And they still stay on the homing missiles, also a problem. The pally dies to it. So yeah, it's definitely a lack of awareness on the part of our DPS to move to the correct location. But also the tank probably could have done so more quickly, so we wouldn't have had this problem. Now I try to do as much damage as possible because I'm looking at the timer. I don't want to focus on healing. So I just time dilate the druid when he has something on him. And I disagree with the demon hunter moving away. I have all my cooldowns. You can just let the thing hit everybody. But then again, we still managed to time it like this. And yeah, it definitely was a bit of a scuffed key. But overall, I think I did reasonably well. Unfortunately, I did not combat log this key, so we can't look at the performance from a percentile-based perspective. I also would have liked to review the deaths again to see if there are any deaths which really are my mistake in the latter part of the dungeon, or if everybody got blown up by bombs, as I think they were. I think the main mistake I made was the time dilate on the tank after the second boss. I think that killed him and ultimately wiped the group. And I will be careful in the future to not make this mistake again. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, and if you liked the video, like the video. If you find that yeah, you have anything you want to ask, feel free to do so in the comments. And other than that, thanks for watching and see ya.